My family demanded I split my lottery winnings, so I gave them each a check for $1, and the explanation I wrote on the memo line made them storm out of my life for good. The headline in the local paper had barely been published for 24 hours before my quiet suburban home transformed into Grand Central Station, with relatives materializing out of the woodwork, their cars lining my previously peaceful street like a bizarre family reunion no one had invited me to plan. They came bearing casseroles and bottles of cheap wine, their faces plastered with smiles that didn't reach their eyes, their arms open for hugs that felt more like strategic maneuvers than genuine affection, all while their gazes flickered around my modest living room as if mentally appraising every item. My phone buzzed incessantly with texts and calls from numbers I didn't recognize, all from people claiming to be second cousins, great aunts, and long-lost uncles. Each message a variation on the same theme. Congratulations, quickly followed by a not-so-subtle hint about their financial struggles and how my windfall was a miracle for the whole family. The pressure mounted by the hour, a suffocating blanket of expectation and entitlement, culminating in a formal summons to my older sister Brenda's house for what she called a family meeting, a phrase that filled me with a cold dread I hadn't felt since childhood. I knew with a sinking certainty that this wasn't going to be a celebration. It was going to be an execution of my financial autonomy, and I was walking into the lion's den alone. The meeting was held around Brenda's large dining table, a table our father had built and where we'd shared countless holiday meals that usually ended in arguments, and the atmosphere was thick with a tense, greedy anticipation. Every seat was filled with the stern faces of my immediate family, my parents, my two sisters, my brother, and their spouses, all watching me as I took the last empty chair, their expressions a mixture of excitement and severe judgment. Brenda, acting as the self-appointed chairperson, began by sliding a single sheet of paper across the polished wood toward me, a document titled Family Wealth Distribution Agreement that had been drafted and signed by everyone present. It outlined, in shockingly formal legal language, their demand for an equal split of the entire lottery jackpot, arguing that, as my family, they were entitled to share in this blessing because they had provided a foundation of emotional support throughout my life. They had even included a clause threatening legal action for emotional distress and familial neglect if I refused to comply. A blatant attempt to bully me into submission using the very concept of family as a weapon. I sat there, the paper feeling like a live wire in my hands, as each family member took turns voicing their reasons why they deserved a share of the money. My brother, Mark, who hadn't lent me $50 when my car broke down last year, talked about his struggling construction business and how an investment would benefit us both. My sister Lisa, who had always mocked my useless art degree, now spoke about her dream to open a boutique and how my success could finally make her own dreams come true. My parents, their faces etched with disappointment, said it was only right that I take care of the family after all they had sacrificed to raise me, conveniently forgetting that they had co-signed my student loans only after I agreed to a punishing interest rate. Their words were a symphony of hypocrisy, each note a reminder of a time I had asked for help and been denied, a time I had been made to feel like a burden or a failure. They spoke of family loyalty as a one-way street that led directly to my bank account, and with every passing minute, my initial shock hardened into a cold, clear resolve. I didn't argue, I didn't yell, I simply listened until they were all done, their expectant eyes fixed on me, waiting for my grateful acquiescence. I folded the agreement neatly and tucked it into my pocket, a move that confused them, and said in a calm, quiet voice that I needed a day to consider their proposal and prepare my response. The room erupted in protests. They wanted an answer now. They demanded immediate gratification. But I stood my ground, insisting that a decision of this magnitude required careful thought. I left Brenda's house amid a chorus of grumbles and threats, the weight of their collective avarice pressing down on my shoulders, but my mind was already made up. I wasn't considering their proposal. I was considering how to make my response so perfectly, devastatingly clear that they would never forget the lesson. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a box of checks and a pen, and I wrote. For each person who had signed that document, I filled out a single check. The amount was not in the millions or thousands or even hundreds. It was for $1. But the real message wasn't in the amount. It was on the memo line. I didn't write anything generic. I personalized each one, etching a permanent, undeniable record of their specific failures into the ledger of our relationship. For my sister Brenda, who had forgotten my birthday every year since I was 12, I wrote, "For 2 decades of forgotten birthdays." For my brother Mark, I wrote, "For not visiting me in the hospital after my car accident." For my other sister, Lisa, the memo line read, "For charging me rent to sleep on your couch when I was homeless." The most difficult checks to write were for my parents. My hand trembled as I filled them out, the memories of their conditional love flooding back. For my mother, who had always been critical and dismissive, I wrote, "For telling me my dreams were a waste of time." For my father, who had always compared me unfavorably to my siblings, the check's memo line simply stated, "For never believing I would amount to anything." Each word was a tiny act of liberation, a cathartic release of years of pent-up hurt and resentment that I had bottled up in the name of keeping the peace. I placed each check into a crisp white envelope, sealed it, and wrote their names on the front with a steady hand, feeling a profound sense of calm settle over me for the first time since the winning numbers were announced. The next day, I invited them all back to my house under the guise of delivering my decision. They arrived practically vibrating with excitement, dressed in their best clothes, undoubtedly already planning their lavish purchases and debt cancellations. They gathered in my living room, their eyes gleaming with anticipation, expecting me to hand over a folder from my lawyer or a stack of bank drafts. Instead, I walked calmly to each person and handed them their individual envelope with a quiet "Thank you for your presentation." The confusion was immediate. They tore open the envelopes, their smiles faltering as they pulled out the single check, their eyes scanning the paltry amount before dropping to the memo line. The room, which had been filled with the buzz of excited chatter, fell into a dead, icy silence. Then the storm broke. Brenda was the first to react, her face purpling with rage as she read her memo line, aloud, voicing shaking with mixture of fury and humiliation. "For 2 decades of forgotten birthdays? What is this?" Mark was next, jumping to his feet and crumpling the check in his fist. "I was busy when you were in the hospital. This is pathetic." Lisa screamed at me, calling me a petty, vindictive bitch for reminding her of the 2 weeks I slept on her lumpy couch after being evicted. My parents just stared at their checks, their faces ashen, the words on the memo lines hitting them with the force of a physical blow, exposing the truth of our relationship in stark, undeniable ink. They didn't try to understand. They didn't apologize. Their reaction was a predictable explosion of defensive rage, a collective storm of entitlement that proved every word I'd written was true. They called me every name in the book, ungrateful, selfish, a monster, their voices overlapping in a furious crescendo of entitlement. They demanded the real money, accusing me of paying a cruel joke, but I just stood there, silent and unwavering, watching the masks of familial affection slip away to reveal the avarice and bitterness underneath. One by one, they stormed out of my house, slamming the door behind them, vowing to never speak to me again, their promises of eternal estrangement sounding more like a gift than a threat. In the echoing silence they left behind, I felt a profound sense of peace. The weight of their expectations was gone, but I knew it wasn't over. I knew the threats of lawsuits were real. So I had prepared one final move. I had scheduled a press conference for that very afternoon with a local news station under the premise of a major charitable announcement from the lottery winner. As my family was presumably on the phone with lawyers, I stood in front of the cameras, my voice clear and steady. I announced that after careful consideration, I had donated the entire net proceeds of my lottery winnings, every single cent, to the National Financial Literacy Foundation, a charity dedicated to teaching people how to manage money responsibly. I explained that I believed the money could do the most good there, helping to prevent future generational cycles of debt and financial dependence. The reporters were stunned, asking if my family supported this decision. I simply smiled and said, "I'm sure they have their own opinions," and ended the conference. The news spread like wildfire. The donation was legally irrevocable, permanently shielding the money from any and all lawsuits my family might try to file. Furthermore, my reasons for the donation, hinting at a desire to break cycles of financial entitlement, were picked up by every outlet, publicly shaming my family and exposing their greed to the entire community. The fallout was swift and absolute. My family became the subject of local gossip, their reputations tarnished by their very public and avarice display. Any legal claims they tried to mount were dismissed immediately, as the money was no longer mine to give. They had played their hand and lost everything: the money, their dignity, and their convenient scapegoat. I received a final furious text from Brenda. "You've destroyed this family. I hope you're happy." I looked at the message, deleted it, and felt